I'd been following education since about 2015, when I had been to the United Nations just to see what was going on. And that's when I heard, in their own words, these agendas for the schools, and them literally say, we will not stop until this is in every classroom in America.
All right, so I'd like to start this off. I'm Julie Beeling with Beneath Sheep's Clothing. I'm super excited to be talking with Natalie Cline of the Utah State School Board here today. And we're going to be sharing, we're going to be sharing some important stuff here, talking about what's going on with our schools here in Utah and Natalie's role in helping us to become aware of issues and be able to push back against some dark agendas. So Natalie, like I've met you a couple of times, but I haven't gotten to know you that well. So I'm excited to get you to know you better. I'd love to hear like what first got you into running for Utah State School Board. I know, I'll just say really quick, there's been a scandal here recently here in Utah that's been overblown out of proportion. And you've already addressed that. I'm not really interested in going over that ad nauseum. So I really like to hear more of what you have to say. So please share what got you why did you run for school board? What year was that? How long have you been in the school board?
So thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I ran for the school board in 2020, and I did really well in my race. I never had anticipated that I would ever run for office. It was something I was trying to find somebody else to run. And last minute, it became apparent there wasn't anybody in my area to run against the incumbent. And suddenly I felt like God was pointing at me and saying, that's because I need you to. And, that quite frankly scared the living daylights out of me. But, I made a promise a long time ago that I would do whatever he asked me to do. And so that's what I did. And miracles followed, and I made it on the board, and here I've been. But my concern in trying to find somebody to run for that position was I wanted somebody that understood the conditions around education and the things that were happening, because I'd been following education since about 2015, when I had been to the United Nations just to see what was going on. I was at that time concerned about this war on the family and these things at play that were trying to undermine and weaken the family. And so I went out there and was listening with those ears to the things that were the agendas and plans around that. And that's when I heard, in their own words, these agendas for the schools, and them literally say, we will not stop until this is in every classroom in America. And I thought, whoa, that's quite the statement.
So to tell us
Not if I
specifically,
can help it.
yeah, until what is, go ahead and be specific, until what's in every classroom.
So this particular meeting that I was at, where they said that it was all LGBTQ people, and they were talking about how important it was to get this ideology into all of the classrooms. And I watched, that was the same year that the marriage, what was it, Obergefell at the Supreme Court was overturned, that marriage is a man and a woman, or that it had to be kept to just that. And so it was just like boom, boom. I went to the UN in March. That happened, I think, in June with the Supreme Court case. And I just thought, oh my goodness. And then I watched other things start unfolding. It was just like a domino effect, right? And after being at the United Nations and hearing so many of the words that we all know now, right? Heteronormativity and just I learned a whole new plethora of words that were shocking at the time, and now they're just commonplace. But I thought, oh, people have no idea the tsunami that's about to hit us.
So 2015, that was?
2015.
Wow, yeah, that was pretty early. So for anyone who is not completely sure what heteronormativity means, it means where it's normal for people to be heterosexual. And that has become under attack in our society, where it's not, it shouldn't be normal, apparently, for people to be heterosexual.
Right. And the
So,
whole idea of intersectionality and queerness, I mean, those were all new things to
mhm.
me, and to hear them go in depth on those issues. And I mean, I remember being in one room where it was a transgender meeting, and everybody in the room was transgender. And the individuals that presented at that meeting ended up coming after the meeting and standing right in front of me, where within earshot, so I could hear their conversation. They were conversing with a couple of other people that had been in the meeting, just casually, and talking about going out on the town, and how fun that is, and because it confused everybody that saw them. And they were just laughing, saying, "Oh, everybody tries to figure out who's the guy and who's the girl, and nobody can tell, and it's so funny." And I thought, they're just messing with us? Like, really? This is what they're doing. Okay. And now, is everybody like the activists at the UN? No. Are there people that have been brought into this lifestyle, or this gender ideology, and do they see themselves as pushing an ideology? No, I don't believe so. I think there's, especially the way it's presented as, this is the new world that we're in. Like, you can be your authentic self, and there's, without any stigmatism, right? Unless you are the person that doesn't believe in that.
I kind of wanted to interject a little bit, actually, to kind of explain um, how that this agenda is actually a Marxist framework. Um, how, it's not that you or myself are against gay people or trans people or people who identify as queer. I mean, I'll speak for myself and you can speak for yourself, but like for me, I don't support any child or any individual to be treated as in a substandard way. Everyone is to be treated with love and respect. Everyone is worthy of love. But the problem is, if this is being taught in the classroom, and not just taught, but actually children being groomed to go to perhaps become trans. And,
Right.
that's in the schools without parental permission. That's the main issue for me. Like you can,
Right. But then also you are deemed as hateful and bigoted, not loving and respectful, if you don't affirm and accept, and not just affirm and accept, but celebrate.
right.
So, where's the balance? It's an all or nothing mentality with them. They want everybody to come full on board. And if you're not full on board, then you're not loving, and you're not respectful, and you're
Right.
not inclusive.
Right. And again, that's also a Marxist tactic to shame and blame everyone if they don't fully accept these agendas. So how is it Marxist? Marxism is an oppressed versus oppressor construct. You identify a group of people who are oppressed or who can be made to feel oppressed, and then you point out who their oppressor is, and you get them to channel their anger at that oppressor. With the gender theory, the oppressed group is trans people. The oppressor is cis normativity, where it's normal for males to be males and females to be females. Nothing against someone who might have gender dysphoria or whatever, even some trans people. That I have no hatred or malice towards anyone, but to go after cis normativity, where it's normal for males to be males and females to be females, as like an evil concept and construct, is insane.
Well, that just opens the door for persecution for something that people didn't do.
So you saw this in the UN in 2015. You didn't see anyone running for school board in your district that understood these agendas. You felt that you were nudged by God to go ahead and put yourself out there. How did that campaign go and that election go?
It was a different kind of campaign because it was happening during COVID. So nobody was allowed to go out and meet in public with groups, right? So most of the campaigning was done right here from behind my screen. And so it was a very different kind of campaign than what I'm facing this year. So
Yeah, but you obviously got elected. Now you've been in for, 3.5 or however long years.
Mhm.
And so tell us about what that's been like for you. I know you've come under attack many times. It's really funny when leftist people try to spar with me on X and they're like, oh, she's been censored by her peers. I'm like, yeah, by people who who want children to be groomed to become trans within the schools. Like, yeah, they censor her, but they don't, I'm glad that she's standing up for it. So what kinds of things have you done? What kinds of things have taken place?
Well, I have been outspoken. I was outspoken when I ran the first time. I knew what these issues were, and I ran a very open campaign that this is what I was going in to fight. And so, I've done nothing but try to fulfill my campaign promises. And in the current climate, it takes a lot of courage to do that, because every time you speak up, you're sticking your neck out there, knowing that these other forces want to silence you and do
Right.
everything they can to stop you, because part of how they get their agenda implemented is by wrapping it in nice language and making it sound wonderful, right? And so they don't really want people to know what it really is until it's implemented and embedded everywhere, to the point where you can't then take it out again, because they weave it into everything, and that creates it creates resilience. When the system talks about resilience, they want to help they say we want to help your kids become resilient. What they're really doing in practice is making the system more resilient to being from agendas that they're implementing being undone. They weave them in everywhere, so that if one thing falls, you still have layers upon layers of other of it embedded everywhere else, so that you can't actually undo it. It's called second order change. And you can look that up. First order change is what they consider reversible. Second and third order change are irreversible. So they just need to keep cover on their agenda long enough to get it fully implemented. And then they can take the mask off, which they are in a lot of ways already taking the mask off, which tells you how far along we are, because they know it's not something that can be easily undone, if at all.
No, and what's particularly difficult about this Marxist gender theory is that, so with the Marxist, with the oppressed versus oppressor, you constantly, the communists, whether people consider themselves communist, if people are acting as communists, they're enabling the communist agendas. You hold up the oppressed as the sacred cow, and anyone who goes against your agenda, you're like, but the oppressed. And in the case with gender theory, it's children who have gender dysphoria that are being held up as the human shields for their agenda. And it's very toxic. And it puts conservatives in a very difficult position, because if we speak out about this agenda where they're literally, and it's not all the teachers, but it's embedded in the curricula, the genderbread person, things like that. If conservatives speak out against this agenda being taught to their children without their permission, then all of a sudden they're a bully and a bigot and a transphobe.
And nobody wants to be called that, especially in Utah's culture, where we're taught to love everyone and be kind. And, it is hard. Like, nobody wants to be called a racist or a homophobe or a bigot, or, I remember the first time I realized, oh my goodness, they're going to end up calling me a racist.
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking out against this Marxist BLM movement.
Right.
And because I'm speaking out, and it happens to be a Black movement that it's really a Marxist movement that's being promoted by Black people, they are going to associate that with racism, and they're going to call me racist.
Mm.
And it wasn't, a couple months later that everybody in this, all of these online mobs and people were calling me racist. And at that time I was like, well, okay, at least I saw it coming. But to, this last go round, to say, I never expected to be labeled as somebody that is sexually abusing a child or attacking a child or cyberbullying, or, all of these things that have been said in this, like, are you kidding? That is like the furthest thing from who I am.
Right. Well, I mean, you can be Black, but if you're a Black conservative who speaks out against the critical race theory agendas, then you become the Black face of white supremacy.
Right. It's all about the ideology. It's not about skin color.
Yeah.
It's, do you adhere to the ideology? If not, you are the enemy.
Right. I know that you've talked a lot about social and emotional learning, And now there's this ethnic studies thing that Utah is going to be implementing starting in this coming school year, 2024, 2025 school year. And I've looked into it, and at what from the way that I explain it, what these curricula do that are not, again, like you mentioned, they're not just meant to be like a class that kids get, but to be embedded in all the
All the
subjects.
subjects. Mhm.
What they do is they remove Judeo-Christian ethics as the foundational ideology of our children, and they switch it and replace it with woke Marxism as the new foundational ideology.
Right. Which undermines and subverts every academic subject there is and makes it something it was never meant to be.
Yeah, and it makes our children into woke Marxist activists
Yes.
with parents not even realizing, and it's a slow drip. Like training up a child in any which way you do is always a slow drip.
Yeah.
You know, everything is a drop in the bucket, a drop in the bucket here, a drop in the bucket there. They are dropping in the bucket for up 16,000 hours from K
Yes.
through 12.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the schools, in the system, they call it creating immersive environments. So they're talking about what the school looks like on the inside, all of the imagery that you see posted around the school, what they see on their Chromebooks that comes in, through the ed tech. But not only that, it's the mindset. They want the child's mind immersed in this new ideology. So it's like a baptism of sorts, like baptism by immersion, where, they are completely immersed in this new framework of thought and belief, such that literally the purpose is to transform their attitudes, values, beliefs, behaviors, dispositions, all of that. And which gets back to, when I went to the UN, I was trying to figure out what is happening that is undermining the family. What is this attack on the family? Like, I feel it, my own family experienced it, but where is it coming from and what does it look like? How do I make it tangible? Well, this is it. They've made this war. It was the war on the family, and now it's gotten even more personal, and it's the war on the children. They play dirty. They don't play with kid gloves.
No.
They expect us to use kid gloves. They don't. And there's
No.
repressive tolerance where the left or the woke left can get away with all kinds of awful, horrible things, and we're expected to tolerate it. But if we make even the slightest misstep in their view of things, there is zero tolerance.
Oh, yeah.
And like we've seen this last couple of weeks, the full force of the government will descend upon you.
Yeah. One thing at one point I really want to make, and I don't know if you have ever experienced narcissistic abuse, but I was actually looking up statistics, and it's about 1 in 5 people in America are likely to have been in some sort of relationship with someone who uses narcissistic abuse tactics. And I've experienced them personally.
Mhm.
And when I started speaking out about Marxism online, I got the exact same treatment from the woke
Yes.
activists.
Yeah.
And so I'm just anyone who's listening, if you've ever experienced narcissistic abuse, it's the gaslighting. Oh no, that's not what we're really doing. The projection, everything they do, they project onto you. Oh, you're the one who's XYZing when they're the one clearly doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and the name calling, the infantilizing, and they comes right down. They go to personal insults. I saw people insult. First of all, I think you are an attractive woman. I saw people insulting your appearance on X last week, and then they started insulting my appearance. Thankfully, I'm a big girl and I can handle it. Like, but
Yeah.
um, like, and then they started calling me every bad name in the world because I was simply pointing out what the queer and gender Marxist agendas are and how they are damaging to our children. Oh no, they can't tolerate that. So here's what we have to understand. I'm speaking to anyone who really cares about Utah's children. We have to, if enough of us, there's more of us in Utah who are sane, who are not indoctrinated with these far left agendas and woke Marxist agendas, whatever side of the aisle people are on, there's way more of us that are sane, that want a sane society, that if we simply say, we're just not going to care what these activists say, we're just going to go about our business and protect the children, then they won't be able to stop us. If they get us fighting each other and like, oh, fighting over little minutia, then we lose. If we do nothing, what will happen, Natalie? What will happen to Utah's children if the current trajectory, sorry if I can say the word trajectory of education here in Utah just continues unchecked? What's going to happen?
It's not a pretty, this is why I keep sticking my neck out, because it is not a sustainable future. There is nothing good that will come from this, and it will only get worse until people have the courage to speak up and stand up. And as long as it's only one person speaking up and standing up, that person will always be isolated and targeted and taken out. But if everybody stands up, what can they do? There's too many targets at that point for them to fire at everybody.
Right.
And it's the only way we win is if we stand together. The woke left is very good. They're very at standing together. And so they win every time, where we fracture and then we fight with each other. And it's a sad thing when it's our children that hang in the balance. It's our faith and our family that hangs in the balance. And that's the whole reason I ran in the first place, is to protect faith, family, and freedom, especially in the education realm.
Absolutely. I mean, this agenda, or these agendas, they're intertwined together. They go after the family, they go after religion. Again, they're retooling, they're removing Judeo-Christianity, Judeo-Christian ethics from children's foundational ideology, and now those things become racist. They become bigoted. And children, in order to be good people, they have to be woke. They have to see everything from this oppressed versus oppressor Marxist construct. They have to become woke social justice activists or allies, or they can become queer themselves, and then they're no longer oppressors. I mean, we see skyrocketing numbers of young people here in Utah and elsewhere too, who are identifying with a novel gender identity or sexual identity. This is not organic.
Yeah, no, it's being encouraged, that sexual experimentation and exploration and the trying on of different identities, instead of helping. I mean, if you want healthy children, mentally and physically, they need to have their core identity solid, right? Instead of messed with and confused. And if they cannot depend on reality, especially biological reality, to stay unchangeable, their whole world becomes like built on shifting sand.
Absolutely.
They will forever be uncertain and insecure and angry and easily triggered. And I mean, we talk about this mental health issue, right? And that we need to fix it and keep them, maybe blame it on social media, use that as a scapegoat. Not that social media is good for kids, it's certainly not, but then they're ignoring all these other things, right? These ideologies, these curriculums, the imagery, the pornography that is rampant in the schools, and acting like that's not the source, and pitting kids against their parents and making kids distrust their parents. None of that is good for the mental well-being of children. They say we want to get rid of the cell phones in schools. They're a distraction, they're harmful, but they say nothing of the Chromebooks, that the kids have the exact same access to these kind of things they say are dangerous. And all of these ed tech programs are simply opening the floodgates for children to be accessed by people that want to exploit them for political, social, sexual, environmental, racial justice agendas. The computers are injected undiluted into the child's brain. You don't have a parent that is acting as a buffer, or a conservative or teacher, or a neutral teacher to try to buffer and protect them from harmful things that may come through the tech, because the teachers are being reduced to facilitators of tech, and the tech is doing all the teaching. It's, they call it, they're bringing in AI, right? Because AI is supposed to be, they're restructuring all of education around technology and artificial intelligence, because that's supposed to help kids learn faster than anything really. But if you look, I made a couple of posts just today on the AI issue in education. And when you realize who's programming AI, and you see how astonishingly racist and biased it is, and how it can change history on a dime and censor and alter, you know, what are kids going to actually be learning? Will they actually have a foundation of true history from original source documents that have not been modified by the superstructure that tech has created to control the narrative? And it's whoever controls the narrative that controls the future. And that's why they want the kids.
Okay, so I already have explored this in depth, but I want you to say who is controlling this agenda? Who is behind all of this, and why would they do this to children? What's going on here?
So you have a lot of globalists. You've got, you've got the big tech organizations, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the George Soroses and the Bill Gates and a myriad of others. You can look into all of the. I've read so many white papers and the global education program that we in Utah are implementing. They know how to make it look like a grassroots kind of local control, but global is the new local. If you read, there's my mind just went blank, but there's an organization in Utah that does studies to understand what the culturally relevant language is here in Utah, so that they can then sell us on these bad agendas just by framing them under these terms that we all associate with good. Wow. So it's easy for them to mask it. And then if it works in Utah, because Utah is so conservative, they know that's a good model, and then they spread it to other states throughout the country. And then we have, people here in Utah in the education system that travel to other countries to train them on, our successes, right? Like Utah is leading the charge on these, the global transformation of education.
Yeah, it's totally insane when I started learning about this. I mean, these global entities, the United Nations, UNICEF, World Economic Forum, they're looking
All of
to
those.
they're looking to frame the ideological views of the entire world populace, because they want their global government, which they will control, and they won't be elected. The global citizens don't get to elect these people. The global citizens just get to obey.
Yes.
And they get to be brainwashed, get to have their kids brainwashed into these agendas, and as adults get to be brainwashed too in various ways. So it might sound really crazy for anyone if this is your first time hearing this. But I mean, everything you've said, Natalie, I've also found in my research that is exactly what's happening.
Right. Well, and they have specific goals with all of these different programs. If you go to my website, higherground.work, we break down a lot of the agendas. It's hard to cover it all here. It's an overwhelming amount to try to read and understand and truly digest. But that's why we put it all on the website, higherground.work, so you can go through and look at it, and you can click to see the evidence of these things in our schools, actual documents, where these things are actually being implemented in Utah. And we've organized and when I say we, I mean myself and Monica Wilbur, who's also running for the state board. As we've researched this together, we've kind of broken down this tsunami of systems that are undermining faith, family, and freedom into 6 categories to try to make it a little easier to wrap your mind around, because it is so large. The first one is social, psychological, and behavioral conditioning of children. The next is erasing sexual inhibitions and boundaries. The next one is controlling outcomes through standardization. So it's very rigid. The next one is outsourcing decisions on children to experts instead of to parents. And the last one is exploiting children for socioeconomic agendas. So under those, you've got things like social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion, mental health, and the whole child movement, which is about putting the full responsibility of the child into the hands of the state and usurping that responsibility from the parents and family.
Yeah, and I'm going to say what a red flag that is with myself being a student of Soviet history in graduate school. That's what the Soviets did. That's how they brainwashed the kids into their militant atheism and Marxist Leninism. The government was in charge of the kids,
Right.
and that is super dangerous.
And you know how they sell that? They sell it as parent engagement plans and family engagement plans and
The
community
opposite.
engagement plans.
The
Yeah, so
opposite of what
it
it is.
sounds like they care about including the family, right? But no, it's just making sure that they can also indoctrinate the parents through the school system so that everybody gets, so they can achieve that same outcome for all. Now, all of their programs are labeled as universal, right? The idea is that no child escapes and no child gets ahead. And we don't get any pockets of privilege, which means children outside the system that they don't have access to. Okay, they can't have that. So you've also got the graphic sexuality, this sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, which Title IX is, the federal government's Title IX has been severely reinterpreted by the Biden administration it was put in place to ensure that women had equal opportunity in sports. And now it's flipped so that it is put in place to ensure that boys can, or men can play on women's teams, and that men and boys can be in women and girls' private spaces. Okay, and if you push back against that, you'll get a Title IX violation slapped on you, which the system takes very seriously. If ever there was a strong kind of punitive system within the education system, it's Title IX, and watch out if you get a Title IX violation put on you. Then you've got the whole comprehensive sexuality education movement, which has come in because Utah has stopped it again and again at the legislative level. They found other ways to implement it, like our sex ed standards includes consent, teaching consent, which is teaching kids how to say yes, and minors can't consent legally, but under the idea of protecting them, a student from bullying or dating violence, they can bring that in. And then it more overtly through the pornography in the schools and in the books that is just blatant. The horrible images that people have seen, that's what comprehensive sexuality education teaches.
Yeah.
But since we can't teach it here, they just bring it in through the books and let the kids have access to it.
And just a little side note, that's also a known communist tactic. I'm sure you already know this, but for anyone listening, they tried this in Hungary when they tried to bring communism there in like the 1920s. And the guy in charge was like, I know just the thing. We're going to go in the schools and we're gonna flood the children with graphic sexual imagery and information. But the people of Hungary actually kicked that guy out. They did not appreciate that. But here we are in the name of being inclusive and open-minded. We have books in our school libraries here in Utah, all over the state, with graphic sexual perversion and cartoon characters doing all kinds of sexual acts on each other, teaching kids how to get on sex apps to meet up with adults for sex illicitly. Like, really, this is not okay.
Yeah, and that's been one of the big pushes that I've made as a board member, is trying to get that out and creating enough of a stink about that people started acting and legislators got involved. And I put forward a policy. There was a bill that was passed to try and stop it, and the board was going to make a policy to implement a model policy, and the model policy they wrote had all kinds of loopholes in it. And I thought, this isn't going to do anything. It's not going to get the graphic sexuality out of our schools. And so I put forward my own amendment that would, actually get the garbage out. It was not adopted by the board. And so 2 years later, we still have porn in the schools, and they've had to run the bill again and try to fix that. And they just passed it again. There are still holes in it, though. It makes exceptions for family and consumer science classes and for medical classes, and for any other class that the board deems as an exception. So tell me, in what class, medical or otherwise, do you need explicit sexuality depicted in order to teach? You don't, I'm a nurse, or and you don't need graphic pornography to learn to be a medical worker. Anatomy charts are not pornographic.
Right.
Okay, so why are we making exceptions for that? Especially when you realize that they are loosening the boundaries between subjects, so that everything is kind of this whole curriculum style where every subject bleeds into every other subject. That way you won't have nothing will be protected, because everything will have a caveat where it can be included.
I just want to stress to anyone listening who hasn't already been hearing about these agendas, everything you're saying, like if we would have heard this 10 years ago, that sounds absolutely impossible to happen. But it absolutely is. This is not, look, I went to school in the 80s. I graduated in the early 90s. My sex education was just about maturation and like maybe a little bit on contraception and like venereal disease when I was in high school. Like it was that this is not that. What's going on now is not that.
Now,
It's
if you go to CIECUS, CIECUS, sex education in the US, it sounds like a government website because it ends with US, but it's not. It's a spinoff of Planned Parenthood and the Guttmacher Institute, which is Planned Parenthood's research arm, so that they can have research created that affirms what they're doing. It's a very corrupt, in-house kind of operation, where they can make themselves look good through very select research that they do. But if you go to CIECUS's website, it says sex ed for social change. Everything's geared towards changing the culture and mindsets around sexuality, so that they can sexualize children. And that's not okay. They promote the national sex ed standards, which if you go to their website, it shows the progress that they are having in getting the national sex ed standards implemented in every state. So everything's like this top down. And every year we have bills run that would move us towards closer adherence to those national standards. These organizations always report, oh, Utah's got a really interesting bill. This is one to watch. And they're cheering to get these things into our state statute. These things that are harmful and not aligned with traditional Utah values and family values.
I saw, you probably did too, a Planned Parenthood video a couple weeks ago that was geared for children, and it was a woman, and there was like on her chalkboard it said virginity with a question mark, and she was kind of like talking about virginity and all the ways that kids can lose their virginity and how it's really not that big of a deal to lose your virginity, and just
or they also say all the ways that you can maintain your virginity and still explore and experiment, meaning you haven't lost your virginity unless there's actual intercourse, right? And then they teach the kids all these other ways, abstinence ways of being able to experiment sexually, that they say it's not actual, that you're still a virgin because you haven't actually had intercourse, but here's all the other ways that you can do things. So
that's fine if parents want to teach their kids that, but the schools without parental permission absolutely have no jurisdiction in instructing Utah's children on virginity and all the ways that they can skirt around it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I've been to the conferences put on by Utah teachers for Utah teachers, called the Pride Not Prejudice Conference. They did it 2 years in a row, and then they rebranded and went underground because I was attending and exposing what was being taught there. And really it was just an effort to classes on how teachers can get around the law or creatively reinterpret the law so that they can push these things in the classroom here in Utah.
And
And they
isn't it that if
probably
the
had
kids,
300 teachers at those conferences.
and isn't it that if the children ask a question, then the teachers are allowed to answer? Like,
Yeah, so that's why you see imagery and displays around the school, because it gets kids to ask questions that then opens up discussion. Also, they have another pedagogy strategy that they use called, that all teachers are trained on. They have whole books. You can look, just Google, and you'll find lots of books on making thinking visible. And which is a John Hattie concept. John Hattie's research and pedagogy practices are being implemented throughout the state, and yet they are based on completely flawed research. And yet that's the direction we're going in
can you
spite of
explain what that is?
research. I'm trying to get it back in my mind here. It's been a little while since I looked at it, but basically it's based on success criteria and learning goals, so that it's a learning intentions. So learning intentions and success criteria, and the students, it's very much a check the box kind of approach to learning, super rigid. Like if they were to teach, here's an example from literacy, if they were to teach comprehension through these early literacy ed tech programs that are now all the rage since the science of reading bill passed last year, everything has to be measurable and with data, right? The learning has to be. And so it becomes kind of a counterfeit of actual real learning, how learning actually happens naturally, and makes it so if you want to teach comprehension, it will have a sentence with a word missing, a blank, and it will say, give them 3 words, kind of a fill in the blank, pick the word that makes the most sense. And that's how they're measuring comprehension, which is not comprehension at all.
Yeah.
To be able to fill in the blank. Okay, but they have to make comprehension measurable. So getting back to the making thinking visible, I'll just say the post that I made this last week, and I don't want to delve into this, unintentionally had the effect that this pedagogical approach has on students, where they present them with something visual oftentimes, and the child then, the wheels start turning and they then say what they think. So I put out this image that just said girls basketball. I didn't attack or infer anything or imply or suggest, as has been said. I simply put a true statement on a picture that was shared publicly by the school itself. So, parent had to sign a waiver that their student's picture could be used publicly for advertising purposes. So there was no expectation of privacy. So I posted that and I simply said girls basketball. Now that could have been taken as an actual affirmation that this girl in the picture was actually a girl, even if she looked otherwise. Was that what I was saying? No, but I also wasn't saying the other, that she was a boy posing as a girl. Okay. It was simply it turned into kind of an interesting thought experiment, because everybody that saw it felt the need to project onto me what they read into that, what they themselves saw, which is kind of what they do with kids in school. Now, mine was completely unintentional. It just happened that way. That was not my intent at all. To bring in the girl, to create her, open her up for derision by the public. Mine was a completely different purpose in kind of speaking to the policy issues that we are facing around this. Okay, but regardless, this is being done intentionally in schools in order to influence children's attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors.
Well, and now there's the technology with this being all on devices, all of the data is maintained in the child's file. And now we have the AI technology for the AI to analyze and psychologically profile instantly all of the children, therefore predict their behavior for life, essentially.
Right, because if you can predict their behavior, you can control their behavior.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason they don't want the kids on their cell phones. They want them on their Chromebooks, because the state owns the Chromebooks, meaning they own the software, they own all of the data that the child inputs, and the data that they collect from the child. And that can all be used to profile the child. And that profile goes with them all through their school years and into the workforce. And it's not, it's not just for the children. They intend to create profiles on all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have a 9-year-old son, and I was recommended when he was preschool age to put him on the Upwork online preschool, and he was in a Montessori preschool too. And I went ahead and signed up for Upwork, and I became increasingly disenchanted with it and uncomfortable with it, and we kind of stopped doing it. First of all, I didn't think it was an effective way at all. It was very ineffective. Going and in person and hands-on stuff was much more effective for my son. And
Mhm.
second, I was like, there's no way that they're not databasing all of like, I was like, of course they're creating a database for each child. Then my son goes to kindergarten at a charter school with a really great arts program here in Southern Utah. First day of kindergarten, I take him to kindergarten, and it's just, here's your Chromebook. And half of his kindergarten was on a Chromebook. And his teacher was a good person, but it was, yeah, anyway. So we've been homeschooling for the most part since then. He did a little bit of time in the schools. Look, I'm going to change the subject. Most teachers in Utah are not Marxists. They're not communists. They're not trying to hurt children. What's going on? Why are teachers going along with all of this? How many of them understand what's actually happening? What's your opinion on this?
Well, I know the teachers go through a lot of trainings, and so they're exposed to this nonstop. And there are a lot of teachers that have bought into this because they feel like this is how you be loving and accepting of all of these students from different backgrounds. Um, they're trying, I think they're well-intentioned and good-hearted people, most of them, that are just trying to, do what they're told is best for the children.
Right.
But then there's the other side where we have this environment of fear, because they know that if they say anything, if they challenge certain things, that what they will possibly face. Um, One of the things that I did during my time on the board last year, I helped author some legislation to protect the rights of conscience. And that was for students and their families, right? So that they could refrain from participating in any aspect of school that violated their religious belief or rights of conscience. Because everything is so embedded, you can't easily just opt out of certain things, right? So to protect, because our Utah Constitution says the rights of conscience shall never be infringed, and that's for everybody.
Right.
So the basis of the law was came straight from our Utah Constitution, which is an element of our First Amendment rights, right, from the U.S. Constitution. So you've got teachers who also need some kind of protection. I spoke to one just this week who's facing a huge problem, and I made a post about it that you can go and see, but she doesn't know what to do, because she's been asked or told by the school counselor that she has that there's a new student in her class that has changed their gender, and she's supposed to now call this student by a different name and different pronouns to the student, but she was also told that the parent's not okay with that, and so when she speaks to the parent, she still needs to refer to this student as a girl and use
How
her
old is this student?
pronouns. This is a high school student. And this teacher is beside herself, because if she's like, that's compelled speech, first off, and she doesn't feel like she's being honest. She feels like she's being forced to go against her conscience, ultimately, because in order to accommodate a certain student, that to me is a problem. Like, our rights end where somebody else's begins, right? The state cannot compel us to use certain language, but she's afraid of, if she challenges it, she will be the first to be let go. There's a case out there where somebody sued when they were being forced to use pronouns for their employees or somebody. And they're like, yeah, you can't force me to do that. And they ended up suing and winning a large sum of money because, First Amendment rights. He had that on his side. But this teacher, she feels like, the state would look at her now as a liability if she was to speak out, so she could sue, but then is the school going to want to keep her on? No, because now she's created a liability for them because she won't go along with the program. So it just puts people in a really tight spot. So it's created this environment or this culture of fear where people don't know what they can say or can't say. And so they self-censor. And that's, from your studies that's very much a communist kind of thing. And if you go to those countries that have practiced communism or people that have lived through that, they're very closed people. They do not say much. They may have a lot of things going on in their mind, but they don't say it out loud. And there is nothing more oppressive than that.
Yeah, and then it's easier to be brainwashed if you don't speak what you really think and you start to brainwash yourself into going with the flow.
Yeah, you self-censor, and that's a really bad sign when we start self-censoring. It's like the anaconda in the chandelier. If you know that story, if you walk in a room, everything looks normal, and then you look up and notice that there's a snake in the chandelier, and so you start changing your behavior and where you move, and to compensate for that potential threat, meaning you're being controlled, but you're doing it to yourself. And that's the easiest way for a tyrant to do it, right? Just get you to control yourself, and then they don't look like the bad guys.
All right. Well, we've painted a pretty stark picture of the state of education in Utah. And this is in spite of lots of teachers with really great intentions, really wanting to help equip Utah's children and youth for their futures. It's gotten really, because it's embedded now at the structural level. We're going to use structural level here. Let's just talk about structural racism. The structure of our schools has been deeply compromised. What if we have a mass awakening? Let's say the rest of the world keeps on going on the crazy trajectory, but if we in Utah are like, yeah, we're not doing that, we're just not doing that. And let's say we had enough people stand up that were like, yeah, we're just not doing this. Teachers, whether they're principals, administrators and parents, and maybe students themselves say, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to go back to a normal education where we're learning, actual academics, that we're not being indoctrinated into these various agendas, where we actually have our freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. Like, what is that? Would it be possible if we here in Utah had this awakening? Could we push back against all of this and stop it here in Utah?
Okay, well, I've seen what one person can do by speaking up. I've taken a lot of heat for it, but a lot of people have woken up to the problems that we're describing, right? And people are, regardless of what side of the aisle you may fall on politically, are concerned about this heavy-handed approach to education, and they want freedom. They want freedom, to protect their own consciences, freedom to think their own thoughts, freedom to decide their own futures, freedom to learn untethered from tech, freedom from indoctrination and divisive labels, and from surveillance and programs that are harmful. So this is why I continue to educate, because I think that is what people need. People can only make good decisions and act in their own self-interest if they have good information. But if that good information is being suppressed and you're not allowed to say it out loud, then it continues to move in a negative direction, right? But if we can get the information to the people and they can see this for what it really is, I think that's the only way we stop it. And so that's why I've, tried to tirelessly continue to speak, even because I realize what's at stake. And we can't afford to not speak. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. And God will not hold us unaccountable if we participate in this, either willfully perpetuating these harmful things, or just through our silence. We cannot go silent, or we will lose. We have to speak up. We have to stand up, and we do it in the, most civil way we can. But, one thing I found is that those that are, hell bent on pushing this onto us and acting upon us instead of letting us choose for ourselves, and have real choice instead of contrived, limited choices. We're not gonna be able to make it if we don't have the courage of our convictions and stand together. And if we do that, I think we'll be okay. We'll be able to get our children to a safer place, and so that they can be healthy and happy, and we can maintain get back the freedoms that we have lost. Because, if you're having to silence yourself and change your behaviors out of fear, that tells you what a bad place we're in.
Right. Well, one of the things that strikes me as I listen to you here during this interview is you don't sound like a bully. You don't sound like a hateful person. And I just, because you're not. And I just want to be clear, going back to the whole narcissistic abuse comparison with the woke left, not everyone on the left, but the woke left, especially the hardcore activists. They want to take you off the chessboard. You are a threat to their agendas. And so they're seeking to nullify you, to nullify your voice, meaning making it so people won't listen to you or don't want to be associated with you. That's what they're working on with you right now. But on the other hand, we, as the people of sanity here in Utah, we can stand up and we can actually nullify those agendas simply by saying we're not doing that anymore. Whether that means people pull their kids out of schools, like I have with my son, I homeschool him, whether that means a teacher who is willing to take the heat. Yeah, some people would get fired. Whether that means, yeah, we're going to be called, people get called bad names. We have to be willing to put up with the narcissistic rage of the woke left. If you've ever experienced narcissistic rage, it's this absolutely insane, just rage where they throw everything at you. We have to be willing to stand up, just like a tantruming child, only they're bigger and it's kind of scarier. We have to be willing to just step around the tantruming woke leftist activists and do what needs to be done calmly and civilly. And if enough of us do that, and I have to also add, every single person running whatever offices people are running for, positions people are running for here in the state of Utah, everything from governor down to something at the city county level, I would urge people to only vote for those who understand these agendas, because our culture, we're in the end stages of a Marxist cultural revolution here in America. That's what's happening. But there's enough people in America that if they knew this, they would say, no, we're not doing this. That's what we have to do. Rise up, say, no, we're not doing this. Does that mean that some people get fired, get called names, homeschool their kids for a time, whatever the case may be? That's what we have to figure out what it is for us to do individually. What else would you add to that as far as solutions for the people who are listening?
Well, for those that are running for office, I would say, or those that are vetting candidates that are running, I would make sure that they understand that they represent their constituents to the board or to the state, not the board or the city council to the people. Because the trainings that all board members and city council people are receiving from, like, the League of City and Towns and the Utah School Boards Association and the UEA and things like that, all tell them that once they get on the board, they are part of a body. and that it cannot be an outlier. Like Senator Reeve, in an interview that was on the news this last week, one of the many that posted about me, she said if she wants to be an outlier, maybe she shouldn't be on the board, because once you get elected, you are part of a body. Okay, that's the collectivist mindset, right? This is collaboration and groupthink, where it really, which really means you capitulate and you give up your own convictions and instead adopt that of the group, so as to not make waves, and you can work as a unified body. But that's how totalitarianism takes root.
Mm-hmm.
You need individuals that have the courage of their convictions and that don't feel like they have to go along to get along in order to get stuff done, because otherwise what they do get done is ineffective. And we see that at every level, whether at the legislature or at city councils or local boards. We see a lot of ineffective things being passed because everybody's trying to collaborate, and in so doing, it gets watered down and the teeth get taken out of it. So we don't have laws that are actually effective. They may sound good, but they don't actually do what they say they're going to do. And so then we can, and yet again, it gives the people the appearance that good things are happening while actually we're still going downhill.
That's a really important point. Yeah. I mean, with the path that we're on, we want outliers. We want people who are standing up. And I mean, that's why I appreciate Senator Mike Lee so much. He's willing to do that in the US Senate. And I know there are people here in Utah also standing up, in our legislature. I mean, God,
It's hard. It's hard because you get in a position like that, and if you want to get your bills passed, you have to get all the others on board to vote for yours, and they don't want to vote for yours unless you vote for theirs, and maybe you don't like theirs. And so it's kind of this really difficult environment. And I get that they're in a really hard place. Like if they want to get good things passed, they have to get others to come on board with them. And so to get good things passed, they sometimes have to take out the strong elements, right? But then if they bring in a bad element along with the good that they're trying to do, or it often undermines the entirety of what they're trying to do. So, I guess it depends on who you're collaborating with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we seem to want to make sure that we are pleasing or being nice to or bringing to the table those that are pushing these Marxist agendas and keep them happy, right?
Right.
They don't care about keeping us happy.
No.
They play to win, right? And they're ruthless.
Yeah.
But because we are good and decent people, we often give into their demands and say, we're trying to compromise and keep everybody happy. But in an ideological war, that doesn't work. It only moves us further and further into that abyss.
Yeah.
Even if it's just incrementally. So, I look at bills that if it moves us out of the, incrementally out of the abyss, then that's a good bill. Even if you can't get everything, as long as it doesn't have anything bad, or as long as it's not written in a way that will backfire or has loopholes built into it,
right,
through ambiguous language or whatnot, then it's a good bill. But too often those other elements get added to it, and then it's just, it almost adds to the confusion and the mess on the ground where the rubber meets the road and these policies or laws are implemented. And it makes things really confusing for parents that, just want to act on their instincts. Oh, that's a man in my bathroom. What's he doing in here? I thought that was illegal. And so, they report that there was a man in the bathroom and find out that according to the law, it's considered a false report because that man was legally able to be in there based on these criteria that were listed in the law.
Right.
They don't know those nuances. They just know there's a guy in the bathroom and he shouldn't be in here. So they report it. If they make a false report more than once, it's the person who reported it that gets slapped with a class B misdemeanor. That's hugely problematic. Again, that works towards silencing people. Who's going to dare report anything if they know that they could be criminalized for getting it wrong?
Mhm. I just have to stress again, back to the narcissism. Narcissists do not like it when their victims set boundaries with them.
Mhm.
They want people who will not assert their boundaries. And it looks like to me that there's been too much of Utah's conservatives not asserting boundaries with the woke agendas. And we have to get back to setting good, healthy boundaries. And even if the people go into their fits of rage over it, we need sane people to set boundaries with agendas that are, I'm sorry, it's too far. We're not going to have biological males, playing in female sports. We're just not. They can't go into the locker rooms. If maybe some
No
place,
exceptions.
right? If people want to have maybe their own league of sports for transgender people, because they should be able to play sports too, then maybe that can be arranged. But we're not going to compromise the safety of girls. It's not safe for girls to play in sports with a biological male unless it's a co-ed thing. I mean, I was in a martial art and we sparred with males and females as a
But you knew it.
and we wore protective gear.
Yeah.
The women, we wore protective gear that the guys didn't wear when sparring. Why? Because they're stronger.
Yeah.
They're physically stronger. So we have to assert these boundaries, let the people rage as they're going to. And I mean, I'm saying this, I'm speaking to just, mothers and fathers, parents, and whatever people who are in any kind of office. We need to get educated about these agendas. I don't know if you've seen the documentary, The War on Children, that
I've
just came.
watched about half of it and it's
Mhm.
amazing what I've seen so far.
I really recommend that for people, thewaronchildren.com. It's on Rumble. It's also on X. That
Yeah.
really goes into a lot of these agendas in depth and for people to get educated. What are some other things, resources for people? You said your website. What's your website again?
Higherground.work, WORK.
Mhm.
So that'll give you all kinds of information that will help.
Yeah, and I've looked through, I mean, the videos that I've seen you do and the information I've seen you put out is very detailed and very high quality information. You guys have done a lot of research and it's a great service that you've done. So people, please check that out. Please, when you're looking into voting for someone for school board, we need to vet everyone running for every office from the governor on down. Do not vote for someone for governor because they're related to your cousin's best friends, whatever's, and someone went to high school with them and knows that they're a nice person. We're not voting, we can't vote for nice people. That's not, we're looking for people who understand the agendas and are willing to set boundaries with toxic, harmful ideologies being thrust upon our children and upon our society. Are there any other things that you would want the people of Utah to hear as what they can do?
Well, I just want everyone to know that I got into this because I care so deeply about protecting children, and making and I have a mother's heart. I had hard things in my own life, and I recognize that we've all been thrust into this kind of abusive relationship with our current government, and the programs and policies and practices that are being foisted upon us. And like you said, not everybody recognizes that because they haven't experienced it themselves. And so people are trying to understand what's happening around them, and they're not necessarily seeing it for what it is. They sense that something's off, but I mean, in a relationship like that, it's kind of crazy making you. It makes you feel like you're the crazy one,
Yes.
but it's because the world around you is going crazy, and you have to recognize that so that you can take precautions and make those decisions, those hard decisions. There are no easy decisions going forward. Everything has become very complicated, and we have to make hard decisions and look at things as they really are and say, what is it I need to do in order to ensure the safety of my child and ensure that they get a quality education that isn't going to turn them against everything that I've tried to, as the parent, teach them, because that's what they want, right? A lot of these individuals that are pushing this agenda don't believe in the family, or they don't have families of their own, and so the only way they can, I don't want to say procreate, is to co-opt other people's children and bring them into their fold or their family, right? The family has been, like gender and marriage, has been almost redefined out of existence to mean something entirely different. So it's up to parents. Well, parents are ultimately accountable to God for the education of their children, and we can't just blindly turn them over to the experts anymore, and no matter how competent those experts may seem, because ultimately we are the ones accountable as parents, and we will have to account to God for the decisions that we made for our children. Does that mean every parent is going to have their children turn out just right? No, we are in a cultural revolution, an ideological battlefield, and there are lots of landmines, and there are going to be casualties. And so in that respect, we are compassionate and understanding of what others are going through, but that doesn't mean we cross the line into advocacy and promoting the very things that are harmful under the guise that somehow that's the only, that's how we show love. That's not how we show love. Telling the truth is the most loving thing we can do. And learning to walk that fine line of truth and love is really difficult.
Yeah.
And no one's going to do it perfectly. And we're gonna slip up, and we're gonna say things that offend good people sometimes, or that we're all human. None of us say things perfectly, and we don't always convey clearly in our words what we actually mean. And so intent matters. And we have to have some grace there, because we've all been kind of thrown into this really difficult scenario that is new territory for us all. And if we're going to stand and we're going to try to hold our ground, we're in that battlefield, and we're going to most likely come away with some battle wounds as we try to get it right. And so my hope would be that we can all try to understand that we're trying the best we can, as imperfect as we are, and recognize the good intents of people's hearts without going so far as to assuming good intent in everybody, because there are a lot of people that do not have good intentions. So we have to be, as the scriptures say, wise as serpents and gentle as doves. It's a very fine line, but I believe with God's help, we can do it.
Absolutely. Well, I am so grateful for this conversation, this chance to get to know you better, and I'm really grateful for what you've done. And I'm grateful to everyone throughout our state of Utah who is getting educated and standing up to these agendas. If we want to save freedom in our state and our nation, we really have to start here on the ground in our local area. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thanks for you guys for watching. If anyone is interested, I have a documentary coming out, Beneath Sheep's Clothing, that will be out in May. And we interview Lisa Logan, who is here in Utah, who goes into the social and emotional learning. She goes into that. She's also interviewed in the War on Children on social and emotional learning, but it's something people should get educated about. Thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you around sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Julie.
Hey, bye.